right now in America, we have more private equity firms than we have McDonald's. That should terrify everyone.
What?
Okay. It is now the investment firm for the Ivy League Nepo babies of choice, right? And they have a 31 to 39,000 company backlog they cannot sell because they've stacked them all with too much debt. They're no longer worth what they're claiming they're worth, and they have to close out their funds. For anyone that doesn't understand how a private equity fund works, the private equity firm takes no liability. They create a fund that has some investors. They borrow the money from other people. They don't use their own money or very little of their own money. They borrow the money from pensions and banks and other investment mechanisms, a lot of public pensions, especially. And then they go and they buy things with that and debt. They stack the debt on top of the company, and the company that they are buying owes the debt back. It's the equivalent of me buying a car and saying, I get to have the car, I get the benefits of the car, I get my credit report better for having the car, but the car owes the payments, and the car needs to go figure out how to pay for itself. And while the car is paying for itself, I'm going to sell its parking space, I'm going to lease out its tires to someone else, I'm going to sell back its contract for its permanent like maintenance package, and I'm going to dividend all that money to myself, and somehow the car still has to pay for itself, and then I'm going to borrow more money and the car is going to owe that too. That's quite literally how it works. Well, in the past, over the last 2 years, as interest rates went up, all of the debt they stacked on top of these companies got very unsustainable, and that debt is adjustable rate debt. So they're paying, in many cases between 14 and 18%. And if they're distressed asset acquisitions, 21% interest on these billions of dollars.
Wow.
Okay. So what's happened is they started doing something called secondaries trades or secondaries market sales, where like if I have ABC private equity and somebody else is 123 private equity, and I have $1 billion company I can't sell, and they have $1 billion company they can't sell, and both of our funds have to close contractually, we just sell them to one another because the free market says they're not worth what they're worth, but we need to close out those funds. So we go borrow from more unsuspecting pension holders. We sell them to one another for the fake valuation we gave each other, and we use that money to pay out our investors from the first fund. Now, the Financial Times has called that like a pyramid scheme for years. For the past 3 years, they've called it a pyramid scheme over and over again. And that was bad enough. The free market wasn't doing anything. There were no fair market valuations. It was all just guesstimations about what they said they were worth. Well, in this New York Times article, it comes out that $100 billion in sales couldn't even be sold through those methods in the last 2 quarters of 2025. So they instead started something new through something called a continuation fund. This is where ABC Private Equity has a $1 billion company I can't sell, okay? And I have a fund that has to close out. So I create ABC Company Fund 2. I go to different investors and borrow their money saying I'm going to buy a bunch of stuff. And then I sell my asset to myself with somebody else's money. And then I use that money to pay out the investors from the first fund. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's the purest explanation of a Ponzi scheme. They are creating funds in their own company and buying their own assets through other funds with other people's money for 50% increased fake valuations when those companies could not sell on the open market. And they're kicking the can another 10 years down the road. And in the process, a bunch of unsuspecting pensioners and 401ks are about to get left with these unsellable assets while they strip mine more and more and more out of them when no one else would buy it. And that is $100 billion American money in just the last 2 quarters of last year. Now they have 31,000 to 39,000 more companies they need to move immediately. How do you suppose that's all going to get done?
I mean,
It's Ponzi scheme.
as you describe it, I mean, it's literally a Ponzi. It's not even a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. It's just a straight up Ponzi scheme. And so I guess what's happening is that Ponzi schemes always come to an end, right? You always run out of other people's money eventually, and that is seeming like it's right around the corner. So private equity, in a panic, is looking around and going, "Let's open up the pension funds and just get that cash." So instead of correcting their behavior or suffering the consequences of this shell game they're playing, they are expecting us. Well, we are bailing them out.